Part 1 Dawn of the Huguenots. The Roman Catholic Church and the medieval Kingdom of France were deeply intertwined. To be coordinated, the French king had to take part in a special church ceremony called the Massacre. He swore to protect the church and took communion like a priest, not like a regular person. This showed he had a strong link to God. In 1516, this relationship became even stronger with the Concordat of Bologna. In return for the Pope's help in wars in Italy, King Francis I gained full control over picking bishops in the kingdom. A powerful court of judges in France, the Parlement of Paris, complained, but they could not stop him. The Concordat led to serious corruption between church and state. Kings picked bishops based on loyalty, not faith. Church positions became rewards for friends and family. This sparked calls for church reform in France, with ideas sounding a lot like those of Martin Luther, the German monk who started the Protestant Reformation in 1517. One reformer in France was Briggs, the Bishop of Meaux. He invited scholars to join him like Jacques d'Etaples, who believed ordinary people should be able to read the Bible in their native French. Their group, the Meaux Circle, taught the Bible and focused on how to understand it better. But when Luther's ideas on salvation and church authority spread to France, the church grew afraid. In 1521, the Sorbonne, France's top theological school in Paris, condemned Luther's ideas. Because Luther had similar beliefs, the Meaux Circle was accused of heresy. By 1525, the Sorbonne shut them down too. Though the Sorbonne opposed them, King Francis I supported learning and humanist thinkers like Luther and Erasmus. His sister, Marguerite, the Queen of Navarre, also supported the Meaux Circle. She gave them protection after 1525, even when the Sorbonne stood against them. But things changed suddenly in 1534. On October 18th, people in Paris and other towns across northern France awoke to shocking posters on their church doors and city walls. These posters harshly attacked the Catholic Mass, which was a core part of Catholic life. One of the posters even ended up on Francis's bedroom door. Francis felt deeply insulted, both by the message and by the breach of security. This event, known as the Affair of the Placards, saw authorities arrest and burn 12 Protestants alive as punishment, and people now saw Protestants as dangerous rebels. Speaking against the Mass was a sign of heresy. Even Queen Marguerite stepped back from openly supporting them. Many Protestants fled France, and one of them was John Calvin, a young lawyer who admired Erasmus and loved humanist ideas. But in 1533, he became strongly committed to Christianity and Protestant reform. Calvin escaped to Geneva, where he joined William Farel, a former member of the Meaux Circle. They tried to reform the church in Geneva, but got expelled. Calvin then moved to Strasbourg, where he wrote the Institutes of the Christian Religion in 1536, explaining key Protestant beliefs. John Calvin believed strongly in predestination, the idea that God had already chosen who would be saved. He thought religion should guide daily life. He wanted people to control their emotions, live simply, and follow strict moral rules to show their faith. While Martin Luther spoke of freedom, Calvin focused on discipline and order. When Calvin returned to Geneva in 1541, he helped build a strict system where church and state worked together. Genevans had to follow dress codes, name their children with approved biblical names, and behave morally. A special church judicial court, called the consistory, could punish rule breakers or hand them over to the city for harsher treatment. After 1542, French laws against heresy became harsher. People could be punished just for reading the Bible without permission, meeting in secret, or disagreeing with Catholic beliefs. Even supporting Geneva or traveling there could lead to death. In 1545, royal soldiers killed many Waldensians in the town of Marandol just for being heretics. In 1551, the Edict of Chateaubriand banned Protestant books and worship, even in private homes. Protestants lost jobs and teaching rights. Still, Protestant groups grew, especially in cities and under noble protection. In 1555, Calvin sent his first missionaries to France. He trained educated pastors in Geneva and sent them across France to build underground churches. By the 1560s, about 10% of France's population had joined. These Reformed Protestants, called Huguenots, began worshipping openly, despite the threat of persecution. After Francis died in 1547, his son Henry II became King of France. Henry II brought a stricter tone to the royal court after his father's debaucherous rule. France looked strong from the outside, but the monarchy had deep problems. The royal government did not have enough money. Even though Henry II earned 5 times more than Queen Elizabeth in England, he could still not afford the royal court, embassies, and constant wars against Spain in Italy. Henry sold government jobs and took out huge loans to try to cover the costs. Meanwhile, many top nobles started following Protestant ideas. Calvin targeted powerful figures like Antoine de Bourbon, the King of Navarre. Antoine owned lots of land in southwest France, where Huguenot churches grew quickly. While Antoine stayed unsure about Protestantism, his wife Jeanne d'Albret fully converted in 1560. His brother, Louis de Bourbon, the Prince of Condé, also joined the Huguenots. Other nobles joined too, including the Admiral of France, Gaspard de Coligny. Even though he was the nephew of the top Catholic official in France, Anne de Montmorency, he supported Protestant reform early on. Some judges in the Parlement in Paris leaned Protestant too, like Anne de Bourg, who was executed in 1559 for heresy and treason. Henry had kept the rival noble families in France in check. But in July 1559, he died after a jousting accident. His teenage son, Francis II, became king. The Guise family, who were hardline Catholics and related to Francis II's wife, Mary Stuart, the young Queen of Scotland, quickly seized control of the government. Even though Francis II was old enough to rule, he was not trained to do so, and was often sick. His mother, Catherine de Medici, stepped in to lead. She trusted 2 powerful brothers from the Guise family, Francois, the Duke of Guise, and Charles, the Cardinal of Lorraine, because they were uncles to Francis's wife, Mary Stuart. The Guise brothers pushed rivals aside and gave top jobs to their own allies. Many older noble families disliked this, especially since the Guises were seen as younger and greedy for power. Just before Henry died, France signed the Treaty of Cateau-Cambrésis with Spain, ending the decades-long Italian Wars. France's government then tried to cut spending to raise money and fix the economy. It lowered army pay, cancelled pensions, and took back royal lands. These cost-cutting measures upset many nobles, as they thought the Guises were using the power to get themselves rich, not to help France. Tension kept building. In March 1560, a group of Huguenots and angry nobles secretly planned to kidnap Francis. Their goal was to remove the Guises from power and present to Francis a Protestant confession of faith. But the government found out about the conspiracy. It reacted with the Edict of Amboise, which forgave most religious prisoners, except preachers and the plotters. The captured conspirators were executed. The Guises blamed the Prince of Condé and Protestant pastors, even though most Huguenot churches had not joined the plot. Still, fear and suspicion spread. After the Amboise Conspiracy, Francis called for the States General to meet in December to deal with finances and religion. Condé tried to rally support for Protestantism, but got arrested. When Francis died on December 5th, his young brother, Charles IX, became king at just 10 years old. King Antoine had a legal claim to be his regent, but Catherine blocked him and took control herself. Early in 1561, Antoine demanded Condé's release and tried to push the Duke of Guise out of the royal court. Catherine made peace by freeing Condé and making Antoine lieutenant general of France's armies. That spring, Huguenots asked to worship freely. Instead, Catherine issued an edict in July that banned Protestant services, but forgave past offenses. It satisfied no one. When the Estates General met up, the crown revealed it owed 4 times more than it earned. The Third Estate, the commoners, blamed corrupt and greedy church leaders, and many wanted to seize church lands to pay off France's immense debt. In September, the First Estate, the clergy, agreed to pay the crown money over time in the Contract of Poissy. While in Poissy, Catherine tried to ease tensions by holding a meeting between Catholics and Huguenots. In September, Protestant leader and disciple Calvin, Theodore Beza, defended his beliefs, but his words upset the Catholic bishops and talks broke down. By the end of 1561, 3 Catholic nobles, Guise, Anne de Montmorency, and the Seigneur de Saint-André, left the royal court and formed the Triumvirate to protect Catholicism in France, and sought aid from Philip II, the King of Spain. France was sliding towards war. Part 2. France Engulfed. Though Catherine de' Medici was a Catholic, she wanted peace between Catholics and Protestants, and hoped to avoid civil war. In January 1562, she issued the Edict of Saint-Germain. It let Huguenots hold church services in the countryside during the day, as long as they stayed peaceful. They could not meet in towns, gather at night, or carry weapons. Catherine warned that anyone who would cause violence would be punished. Many Catholics were shocked. The Parlement of Paris refused to make it law, warning that letting Huguenots worship would divide the kingdom. The judges said Charles IX, like past kings, must uphold his oath to fight heresy and protect the Catholic Church. Some also believed Catherine had no right to act because she was a woman, and the king was still too young. Catherine sent 2 letters forcing the Parlement to register the edict. They finally did so on March 6th, and made it clear that they were doing it against their will. But it was too late. 5 days earlier, on March 1st, Guise was passing through the town of Poissy and saw Huguenots holding a service in a barn. While the meeting broke the edict's rules as it was inside a town, Guise had no right to interfere because it was a private service. Still, he interfered anyways, and a fight broke out. His men shot into the congregation, killing around 30 and wounding more than 100. The French Wars of Religion had begun. News of the Massacre of Poissy spread fast. In Paris, Catholics celebrated, calling Guise a hero. Huguenots were terrified and expected more violence. Catherine said she would investigate and told Guise to report to the royal court. Instead, he marched into Paris with 3,000 soldiers and was welcomed by cheering crowds. At the same time, Huguenots started gathering around the Prince of Condé. The country was splitting in two. To calm things down, Catherine made Condé's brother, Cardinal Charles of Bourbon, the governor of Paris, and told both Condé and Guise to leave the city. Neither listened. Late in March, King Antoine arrived and supported the Catholic side. On Palm Sunday, he and the triumvirate held a Catholic march through Paris with loud gunfire. Catherine fled to Fontainebleau. On March 27th, Guise went to Fontainebleau and pushed Catherine to return to Paris. 4 days later, Guise and Antoine brought her and Charles IX back to the capital. Catherine now sided with the Catholics. Meanwhile, Condé took over cities like Orléans, Rouen, Lyon, and Tours. He demanded the triumvirate be removed and the Edict of Saint-Germain enforced. Violence spread across France. In July, the Parliament of Paris banned partisan worship and allowed open killing of Huguenots. Catherine asked Spain and the Pope for help in the war, while Huguenots turned to England. Queen Elizabeth agreed to help, just as long as she could take the port of Le Havre in Normandy, hoping to use it to win back Calais. The Catholics started to recover by retaking Blois in the Loire Valley. In the south, the Huguenots gained towns, but failed to capture Toulouse, thanks to the triumvirate cutting off southbound Huguenot routes by seizing Bourges. Fearing the English might help the Huguenots, they attacked Rouen in Normandy. On October 26th, royal troops stormed Rouen. For 3 days, they looted, killed, and massacred. During the fight, Antoine was badly wounded. He died soon after, succeeded in Navarre by his wife, Jeanne d'Albret. On December 19th, the Royalist and Huguenot armies clashed at Dreux, 45 miles west of Paris. At first, many soldiers hesitated to fight because they had friends or family on the other side. Condé's Huguenots won early gains and even captured the Catholic leader, Montmorency. Guise then led a surprise attack and captured Condé. Both sides lost to the leaders in the same battle. Later, the pro-Huguenot Gaspard de Coligny arrived with fresh troops. He killed the Catholic Salange, but failed to break their line and had to retreat north to Caen in Normandy. After Dreux, Guise took command of the royal army and laid siege to Orléans. But in February 1563, a Huguenot named Poitras shot and killed him. With key leaders on both sides dead, Catherine pushed for peace. In March, a second Edict of Amboise gave Huguenots limited rights. Nobles could worship on their land, and Huguenots could meet in towns Huguenot forces had held. The edict made Reformed Protestantism look like a religion only for nobles, hurting its perception. To help with getting back Calais, Elizabeth sent troops to take over Le Havre. But when Conde agreed to the Edict of Amboise, Elizabeth felt betrayed and refused to give Le Havre back. French forces under Montmorency and Conde attacked and retook the city in July 1563. In the 1564 Treaty of Troyes, France kept Calais, but paid England 120,000 crowns. The Parlement of Paris refused to accept the Edict of Amboise, again saying it would split the country more. To take control, Catherine officially made Charles king, though still a 13-year-old, with help from the Parlement of Rouen, not Paris. There, Charles gave a fierce speech, demanding loyalty. But many local parlements still delayed approving the edict. So, in 1564, Catherine and Charles toured across southern and eastern France to force judges to accept the edict. At the same time, the Cardinal of Lorraine, brother of the murdered Duke of Guise, took control of Charles's council and pushed for war against Huguenots, which went against Catherine's plans for peace. In 1566, Protestant riots broke out in the Netherlands. Philip II sent troops under the brutal Duke of Alba to crush the unrest. Meanwhile, in September 1567, Conde and Coligny tried but failed to seize Charles from the grips of Cardinal Lorraine at Meaux. Fighting broke out again, and Huguenots seized Orléans and killed 80 Catholics in Nimes. After a hard-fought battle and the death of Montmorency at Saint-Denis in November, both sides made peace again in 1568 with the Edict of Longman, repeating the earlier Edict of Amboise. After the Edict of Longman, Conde and Coligny went to Noyers and Tanlay, southeast of Paris. Even though Catherine said she supported peace, she secretly ordered Tavannes, the governor of Burgundy, to arrest them. But Tavannes quietly warned Conde instead. Conde and Coligny took the hint and escaped, fearing they'd be killed like other Protestants in the Netherlands. They secretly made an alliance with William of Orange, the leader of the growing Dutch Revolt. Conde and Coligny escaped to La Rochelle, a safe port city on the Atlantic. Jeanne d'Albret and her teenage son, Henry of Navarre, joined them. In early 1569, the Huguenots took over more towns, and in response, the royal government banned Protestantism through the Edict of Saint-Germain. On March 13th, royal troops surprised the Huguenots at Jarnac. Conde was captured and killed, possibly on Catherine's orders. Other Huguenot leaders soon died too, likely from poisoning. Jeanne named her son Henry, and Conde's son, also named Henry, as new leaders of the Huguenot armies on paper, but Coligny led most of the armies in practice. Coligny joined with some German allies and fought the Royalists at Moncontour on October 3rd. The battle quickly turned into chaotic cavalry charges, resulting in Coligny being injured and the Huguenots fleeing. In 1570, both sides signed the Peace of Saint-Germain and Laye. It gave Huguenots the right to worship and control of 4 towns, La Rochelle, Montauban, La Charité, and Cognac, for 2 years. Many Catholics were angry, but Catherine needed the peace and had few options left, especially since Philip II now refused to support her. Part 3. A Red Wedding. After the Peace of Saint-Germain and Laye, Catherine tried to bring Catholics and Huguenots back together. She planned 2 political marriages. Her daughter Margaret of Valois would marry Henry of Navarre, and her son Henry, the Duke of Anjou, would marry Queen Elizabeth. But the plans ran into trouble. Many Huguenots did not want Henry of Navarre to marry a Catholic princess. Navarre's mother had her doubts, and Coligny wanted Navarre to marry Elizabeth instead. At the same time, Dutch rebels hiding in France wanted to start the revolt against Spain. Coligny backed the plan and urged Charles to get involved. Charles, eager to break from his mother's control and earn glory like his brother Anjou, agreed. Coligny returned to the royal court in August 1571, but many still viewed him as a rebel. The Guise family, now supported by Spain, wanted revenge on Coligny for the murder of Francois, their previous duke. In April 1572, the Dutch Revolt began when they took the town of Brielle, and William of Orange declared war. Coligny convinced Charles to send a few hundred troops to help take Mons, but the mission failed, and war with Spain seemed more likely. Despite tensions, the Valois-Navarre wedding moved forward. Armed Huguenots came to Paris for the wedding, as did Catholic nobles. The city was on edge. Catholic preachers called the marriage an insult to God. A wedding meant for peace now stirred fear. On August 18, 1572, Henry of Navarre and Margaret of Valois got married at Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. Their wedding was followed with celebrations, games, and parties. But underneath the joy, tensions ran deep. On August 22nd, someone shot Coligny in his arm. Many believed a Catholic noble connected to the Guise family was behind the assassination attempt. Rumors then spread that the Huguenots were planning revenge. Fearing another civil war, Charles and his council decided to act first. Early on August 24th, St. Bartholomew's Day, royal guards and Catholic nobles stormed Coligny's house, murdered him, and threw his body from a window. His head was sent to the Pope. Violence then spread through Paris. Thousands of Huguenots, including women and children, were killed in the streets and in their homes. Some were forced to become Catholic at gunpoint, while others were robbed or held for ransom. Alcohol, jealousy, and old grudges made the bloodshed worse. One Parisian bystander observed that the streets were covered with dead bodies, the river stained, the doors and gates of the palace bespattered with blood. Wagon loads of corpses, men, women, girls, even infants, were thrown into the Seine, while streams of blood ran in many quarters of the city. One little girl was bathed in the blood of her butchered father and mother, and threatened with the same fate if she ever became a Huguenot. While some Catholics joined in, others stayed inside or protected their Huguenot neighbors. The killings soon spread to other cities like Lyon, Rouen, Bordeaux, and Toulouse. In some places, local leaders helped the violence, in others, they held back. By the end, some 20,000 Huguenots were dead, Coligny among them. The Pope celebrated, as did Philip II. The Huguenots never forgot. Despite the massacre, many small Huguenot towns kept fighting. In Saint-Cyr, Huguenots refused to give up their faith. They starved rather than convert, eating horses, rats, grass, and even, in one terrible case for a couple, their baby. La Rochelle was more important, however. Anjou came with an army to take the city. The siege dragged on for months, with over 12,000 cannon shots fired. Still, La Rochelle held out. In May 1573, Anjou learned he had been elected King of Poland-Lithuania. To take the crown, Poland's nobles required him to accept religious freedom. This gave him a reason to end the siege. In June, the Edict of Bologna allowed private Huguenot worship in select towns, but public services were banned. When Anjou left for Poland in December, Charles's younger brother, Francis, the Duke of Alençon, hoped to gain power in France. But when Henry, the new Duke of Guise, accused Alençon's ally of plotting murder, Charles replaced Alençon with a Guise supporter. Many Huguenots then gathered behind Alençon. The massacre had changed French politics. Some Huguenots supported local nobles instead of the king, like Henry of Montmorency, who now governed most of southern France like it was an independent state. Some other Huguenots and Catholics formed a group called the Politiques. They wanted a strong, independent king that was not controlled by the Guise family or Spain. They supported Alençon, who tried to openly rebel with Condé in 1574. The plan failed, and Catherine threw them in prison. Charles died soon after, in May, at just 24 years old. Anjou was Charles's heir, so when Charles died, the King of Poland-Lithuania became King of France. Anjou should have asked the Polish Parliament, the Sejm, for permission to leave. But instead, he snuck away in June, and unfairly left Poland without their king. On his way to France, he stopped in Venice and enjoyed parties, before finally arriving in Lyon in August. He acted friendly with his brothers, Alençon and Navarre, but watched them closely. Now ruling as King Henry III, he soon faced trouble. Henry of Montmorency, angry at being ordered to step down, wrote a public letter attacking the king's Italian advisors. At the same time, Condé traveled to Germany to ask partisan leaders for help. John Casimir, the Count Palatine of Zweibrücken, agreed, hoping to gain land in return. In September 1575, Alençon escaped from custody. He released a statement calling for lower taxes, more rights, and a meeting of the Estates General to fix France. Around the same time, John Casimir invaded eastern France with 20,000 mercenaries. Henry III and Catherine could not stop Alençon or raise an army. By spring 1576, Protestant forces were near the Loire River, ready to march on Paris. With no other choice, Henry III gave in. On May 6th, he signed the Edict of Boulogne. This edict gave Huguenots nearly everything they had wanted since the wars began. It gave the Huguenots freedom to worship in public, the right to build churches, and promised to call the Estates General. In December 1576, the Estates General met in Blois. Over 400 deputies were elected, mostly Catholics. The elections were unfair. Many were only announced in Catholic churches or held in secret. Even though Huguenots had asked for the meeting, most could not vote or even attend, and only one Huguenot deputy was chosen. Henry wanted money for a new war against the Huguenots. The clergy supported taxes and religious unity, but the nobles and commoners refused to pay, even if they supported the idea of war. To gain support, Henry created Catholic militias across the country. Local officials had to collect money and choose loyal nobles to lead them. Some Catholics, especially the Guise family, did not want to wait for the king. They formed their own Catholic league to fight the Huguenots. Henry tried to take control of this league, but it only made him look weak. Later in December, Henry asked the estates to send messages to Condé, Navarre, and Montmorency to come discuss religion. Condé and Navarre refused. Montmorency, however, abandoned the Huguenots in March after disagreements and an offer of land from the king. In September 1577, the Treaty of Bergerac made peace. It allowed Protestants to worship in only one town per judicial district. But problems quickly returned. Alençon left France to join the Dutch rebels, and in the countryside, taxes, violence, and war led to peasant revolts. Condé used this chaos to take La Fère in 1580. Still, most Huguenots wanted peace, and in November, Henry helped re-establish it through the Treaty of Fleet. Part 4. War of the Three Henrys. On June 10th, 1584, Alençon died. Alençon was Henry's heir, and because he had no sons or any child to speak of, this meant that his distant cousin, Navarre, was now next in line to the throne. To the Catholic League, this was their worst nightmare. If Henry died, a Protestant would become King of France. In secret, the Catholic League signed the Treaty of Joinville with Philip II in December 1584. They agreed to work together to fight Protestantism in both France and the Netherlands. The League chose Navarre's Catholic uncle, Cardinal Charles R. Bourbon, as the real heir. The slow arrival of aid from Spain, and Catherine's attempts to stall Henry, resulted in the Treaty of Nemours being signed in July 1585. This gave more power to the Guise family. It banned Protestant worship and forced Protestant ministers to leave France. Navarre was officially removed from the line of succession. Both sides wrote public letters defending their choices. Catholic propaganda warned that if Navarre became king, Catholics in France would suffer like those in Protestant England. Meanwhile, the League started acting like its own government. A secret cabal supported by the League, called the Committee of 16, took control of Paris's institutions. In September 1585, the Pope officially declared that Navarre could not inherit the French throne. Henry refused to share this news publicly, but people read it anyways. Catholics were happy, Protestants were furious. By 1586, France was once again split and divided. Civil war had returned. In the summer of 1587, Henry decided to lead an army to stop a large German force sent to help the Huguenots under Navarre. He put anti-Joyeuse in charge, but Joyeuse led mostly young and poorly trained troops. In October, they fought Navarre's experienced mercenaries at Coutras. Joyeuse died in battle, and Henry's army lost. Navarre did not follow up on his victory. Most of his German mercenaries left, and the few who stayed were scattered and defeated by the League at Vermory and Arnoux. The Guise family hoped to take Joyeuse's place in power, but Henry instead gave it to his favorite, the Duke of Epernon. Huguenot propaganda then alleged that Henry had no money, and the League accused Epernon of stealing. While the country faced food shortages, rising prices, and heavy taxes, Henry kept partying and spending what little money he had. In May 1588, Henry, the Duke of Guise, entered Paris with support from the 16, even though King Henry advised him not to come. When Henry sent troops, Parisians fought back and built barricades. Guise calmed the crowd, and Henry fled the city. Utterly powerless, Henry gave in to the League's demands. The new Edict of Union removed Epernon, gave Guise more power, and named the Cardinal of Bourbon as Henry's heir. But Henry secretly plotted revenge. In December, Henry invited Guise to a meeting and had him killed. He also killed Guise's brother, Cardinal Louis, and arrested others like Cardinal Bourbon. Paris rose in anger. In 1589, the Sorbonne said people did not have to obey Henry. The League made Cardinal Bourbon their king and gathered under Charles of Mayenne, Guise's brother. On January 5th, 1589, Catherine de' Medici died at age 69. Her death left Henry politically isolated. He was stuck between the Catholic League in the north and the Huguenots in the south. It did not help that his murder of a cardinal made the church angry at him. Henry knew he could not win alone, so he made peace with Navarre. The two Henrys put aside their differences and marched together toward Paris to take back power from the third Henry. As their army neared the city, Paris exploded in rage. Catholic preachers called Henry evil and said he should die. On August 1st, a young Catholic friar named Jacques Clement came to Henry's camp, pretending to bring news from Paris. Henry let him in. When Clement got close, he pulled out a knife and stabbed Henry in his abdomen. Clement was executed then and there, while Henry spent the rest of his remaining hours in dying agony. Before dying, he named Navarre his heir, but begged him to become Catholic for the sake of France. Many Catholics in Paris cheered Henry's murder and called Clement a hero. Legally, Navarre became King Henry IV, but of course, most Catholics refused to accept him. On August 7th, the Parlement of Paris officially named Cardinal Bourbon as King Charles X, even though he was still in prison. Devoted Catholics and Huguenot troops deserted Henry IV's army in opposition, forcing him to stop his siege of Paris. Part 5. Paris is well worth the Mass. Forced to give up the siege of his capital, Henry IV retreated north to Normandy. Charles, the Duke of Mayenne and leader of the Catholic League, followed him and tried to trap him. But on September 21st, 1589, Henry surprised Mayenne and won a battle at Arques near Dieppe. In November, Henry attacked Paris again. His soldiers broke into part of the west side and killed 800 defenders, but the city's old medieval walls held strong. When Mayenne returned to Paris, Henry withdrew and moved to Tours. There, he heard that Venice had recognized him as king, the first Catholic state to do so. Mayenne's defeat at Arques made him look weak. Many League supporters started to lose faith in him. The League split, and Mayenne had to lean more on Spain and the Pope for support. In March 1590, Henry crushed Mayenne's army at Ivry. The defeat and the death of Cardinal Bourbon in May hurt the League even more. Henry then moves to attack Paris again, He surrounded the city and cut off food supplies. His cannons bombarded the city, but his Catholic allies warned him not to storm it, as they feared doing so would make him seem heartless. Henry did not need to storm Paris in order to cause deaths, however, as his siege saw tens of thousands die of starvation. In September, Spanish troops under Alexander Farnese, the Duke of Parma, accompanied a convoy of food to the city. Henry was forced to abandon Paris again. After failing to take Paris a third time, Henry turned his attention to Rouen. Queen Elizabeth did not want Catholics to control the French coast, so she sent soldiers led by Robert Devereux, the Earl of Essex, to help Henry. Rouen's people fought hard to defend the city. Henry tried to starve them out, but when Spanish troops under the Duke of Parma again arrived in 1592, he ended the siege. The fighting left Rouen and nearby towns badly damaged. Many people lost faith in the League and wanted peace, as well as a strong king who could restore order. In Paris, support for the League also began to fade. The 16 feared the city might soon openly support Henry. On November 15th, they arrested the head of the Parliament of Paris and 2 judges. They accused them of helping Henry and hanged them without a trial. Their cruelty shocked Mayenne. He returned to Paris, hanged 4 of the 16 leaders, and ended their rule. The rest fled, and their control over Paris collapsed. With his chosen heir, Cardinal Bourbon, dead, Mayenne called for a new Estates General in 1593 to choose a new Catholic king. Philip II tried to push his daughter, Isabella Clara Eugenia, to marry the selected candidate. This angered the deputies of the Estates General, who had had enough of Spanish meddling. Some walked out in protest, and in June, the Parliament of Paris ruled that no foreigner could rule France. Luckily for the deputies, a saving grace came on July 25th, 1593, when Henry officially converted to Catholicism, famously but allegedly declaring that Paris is well worth the Mass. This brilliant political move erased the League's main reason for existing. Many Catholics in towns now began to support him, some of them for a price. Henry agreed to pay off town's debts, lower taxes, and give money to nobles for their support, a sacrifice of around 30 million livres. Henry could not be crowned in Reims, as French kings traditionally were, so he chose Chartres instead. He was crowned there on February 27, 1594. In March, his troops entered Paris without much resistance. Henry went to Mass at Notre Dame and watched a garrison of 3,000 Spanish soldiers leave the city. Still, the war was not over. Philip II was planning another attack from Flanders. In January 1595, Henry preemptively declared war on Spain. That June, Royalist cavalry trampled a Spanish force at Fontaine-Française, convincing Mayenne to make peace with Henry. The Catholic League was now more or less dead. But Spain kept attacking. They captured towns like Cambrai, Calais, and Ardres. Henry lacked money, and Dutch help came too late. In March 1597, the Spanish took Amiens, but Henry managed to surround the city and force the surrender, declaring victory. In the winter, Henry dealt with the last League rebel, the Duke of Massacre, who held out in Brittany. Massacre knew he was too weak and decided to hand over towns like Danz in return for compensation, finally ending the League's resistance. With royal power strong again, the Catholic League broken, and Spain on the back foot, Henry wanted to finally end over 3 decades of war between Catholics and Huguenots. On April 13, 1598, he issued the Edict of Nantes. This edict finally gave Huguenots the right to practice their faith. They could hold church services on land owned by Huguenot nobles, and in 2 towns in each judicial district. They were also allowed to own land and hold jobs. But there were limits. Huguenots could not collect taxes, build forts, form armies, or meet for political reasons. Some parlements did later approve of the edict. Paris accepted it in 1599. Toulouse and Bordeaux followed in early 1600. Rouen did not agree until 1609. Henry sent mixed teams of Catholics and Protestants across the kingdom to make sure the law was followed, but many towns, especially Catholic strongholds, resisted. Regardless, what truly mattered at the end of the day was that the French wars of religion were finally over. Around the same time, Henry also made peace with Spain. On May 2nd, 1598, the Peace of Revenge made both countries return land taken since 1559. One major issue was over Saluzzo, a French city in Italy taken by the Duke of Savoy in 1588. In 1601, the Treaty of Lyon gave France richer land in Brest in exchange for Saluzzo. The exchange had another effect as well. It let France block Spain's military supply routes leading to the Netherlands. If France and Spain went to war in the future, Spain's new king, Philip III, would have trouble maintaining his war against the Dutch Republic. With France now at peace, Henry could focus all of his attention to fixing France. The country was deep in debt after the wars, and local officials often stole public money. Many bought their jobs instead of earning them, which made corruption worse. Henry's close ally, Maximilian de Bethune, the Duke of Sully, worked hard to fix this. He raised taxes on goods like silk and salt, and sent inspectors to reduce misuse of funds in the provinces. A new tax, the Paulette, let officials pass their jobs to their children for a fee, giving the crown a steady income. By 1607, France's debt fell from 147 million livres to around 16.7 million, and for the first time in memory, the budget was balanced. With peace, farms recovered. New crops from the Americas like maize and potatoes spread, boosting harvests. Trade was revived in cities like Marseille and La Rochelle. Henry founded a trading company in the East Indies and began settling colonies in modern-day Quebec and Nova Scotia. Yet, danger always followed Henry. Catholic extremists never forgave him, even after he became Catholic. He survived several assassination attempts between 1593 and 1596. On May 14, 1610, his carriage stalled in Paris traffic. A lone man named Francois Ravaillac took this chance to jump up and stab him 3 times, killing Henry instantly. Good King Henry was succeeded by his 8-year-old son, Louis XIII. Henry's second wife and Louise's mother, Marie de Medici, took over as regent. Unfortunately, she was not as politically astute as Catherine. Epilogue: ROHAN'S War. Under Marie de Medici's regency, it did not take long for the royal government to again turn against the Huguenots. As a Catholic raised in Italy, she avoided working with Protestants and worked instead with former members of the Catholic League. The Huguenots soon began to lose the power they had gained from the Edict of Nantes. Many Huguenot nobles started switching to Catholicism, enticed by rewards like money, titles, or land. This hurt Huguenot unity and strength, though they had still had enough cohesion to legally gather and choose Henry II, the Duke of Rohan, as their leader. Tensions rose when Marie's favorite advisor, the Italian Concino Concini, gained power. He opposed the Huguenots and pushed for closer ties to the Pope. His rise angered nobles such as Henry II de Bourbon, the Prince of Condé, who led a revolt in 1614. Condé opposed Mary's plan to marry Louis XIV to Spain's Anne of Austria and called for the Estates General to limit her power. The Estates General of 1614 was a blow to the Huguenots. Catholic leaders demanded the end of Protestantism, the destruction of Huguenot fortresses, and the return of seized church land. No agreements were reached, and unrest continued. In 1617, Louis XIII forcibly took power, had Concini killed, and exiled his mother. But he still aimed to weaken the Huguenots. He targeted Béarn, a small Protestant territory in southern France, ordering that church land be returned to Catholics. When Béarn resisted in 1618, he prepared an army. At the same time, news came of a Protestant revolt in Bohemia, sparking fears of a larger European war. In summer 1620, Louis led his army through southwest France to show his power and remove leaders who might cause trouble. In Béarn, the Huguenot governor, the Duke of La Force, chose not to fight. By October, local leaders accepted Louis's rule, restored the Catholic Church, and allowed priests to return for the first time in 50 years. Louis entered Pau on October 15th without a single shot fired. The news alarmed La Rochelle, the strongest Huguenot city. In November, an assembly of Huguenot leaders declared they would not make peace without the entire assembly's approval. Louis saw this as open rebellion and charged them with treason. In 1621, Louis attacked. His army captured Saint-Jean-d'Angely, protecting La Rochelle after a month's siege, then tried to take Montauban, the second largest Protestant stronghold. Disease, desertion, and winter forced him to retreat. In 1622, the Duke of Soubise, Rohan's brother, joined the revolt. Louis then marched south to besiege Montpellier near the Mediterranean coast, taking dozens of towns along the way. Some of these towns, like Nègrepelisse, saw royalist troops commit horrific massacres of the town's civilians. With her position in jeopardy, La Rochelle agreed to let Rohan negotiate peace. The Treaty of Montpellier, signed in October 1622, forced Huguenots to give up nearly half their towns and banned political assemblies. Their political and military independence was broken, with only La Rochelle still holding out. In 1624, Armand Chien du Plessis, the Cardinal of Richelieu, joined France's royal council. At 22, he became Bishop of Lausanne and studied at the Sorbonne. He worked hard to improve the Catholic Church in his area, but faced many local problems. Growing up during the Catholic League's height of power, he saw Huguenots and rebellion as one and the same, which shaped his domestic policy. His foreign policy was different. Even though the Spanish and Austrian Habsburgs were Catholic, they encircled France with their lands, limiting French expansion and growth in Europe. By 1625, the Bohemian Revolt had grown into the 30 Years' War, even pulling in countries like Denmark and Spain. That year, Spanish troops entered northern Italy, threatening France's border. Richelieu believed France could not fight Spain abroad, while also battling the Huguenots at home. The crisis grew when the Duke of Soubise fled to England, sought Spanish help, and seized the islands of Ré and Oloron near La Rochelle in January 1625. This raised fears of foreign intervention. Richelieu then persuaded Louis to make a truce with La Rochelle to focus on Spain. The Treaty of Paris, signed February 6, 1626, ended all hopes for Huguenot independence. Soubise, unable to gain real support from both England and Spain, accepted a pardon and joined the Royal Army. A marriage between Louis's sister, Henrietta Maria, and England's King Charles I cut English aid to the Huguenots. La Rochelle was effectively defanged and no longer posed a serious threat. The Prince of Condé told Louis, "La Rochelle is without land, without islands, without sea, without soldiers, without ships. 6 months without real fighting, and she is yours." In 1627, Charles I broke his promise not to help the Huguenots. He sent an English fleet led by George Villiers, the Duke of Buckingham, to capture La Rochelle. Buckingham landed 8,000 troops and attacked the French fort on the nearby island of Ré. When Louis recovered from illness, the French quickly pushed the English out in October. Next, Louis aimed to capture La Rochelle itself. Richelieu said it was better to starve the city rather than attack it head-on, as to spare the lives of their soldiers. Louis agreed and gave Richelieu full control. The French built a huge dike to block the harbor so no English ships could bring in food or aid. On land, soldiers surrounded the city and blocked all exits. Starvation set in. By October 1628, La Rochelle's population withered away from 27,000 to just 8,000. They surrendered unconditionally. Louis did not fully trust them, but spared most people. The city lost its independence, walls, and military power. Surprisingly, the Huguenots were still free to worship. At the same time, Louis got involved in Italy over who should rule the Duchy of Mantua. He and Richelieu planned to push the Habsburg enemy out of the region, then focus on any remaining Huguenot strongholds. When they did, the town of Briggs resisted, so Louis showed no mercy. The town was burned, and most of its defenders died. Other towns surrendered soon after. On June 28, 1629, the Peace of Alais ended the French Wars of Religion for good. The Huguenots kept their right to worship, but lost all of their military power, land ownership rights, and political freedom. By the end of the French Wars of Religion, around 4 million people had died. Farmers fled violence, their fields were left empty, and food became scarce. Towns under attack lost trade, and if they were looted, it took years to rebuild. One big result of the wars was the rise of absolutism in France. The wars exposed deep problems with how taxation and royal authority worked. Henry IV and Louis XIII made changes to rely less on nobles and more on their own power. In 1614, the Estates General even asked Louis to make it a law that only God gave him power, and no one on earth could challenge him. After that, the Estates General did not meet again for another 175 years. Unfortunately for the Huguenots, Louis XIII's son and successor, Louis XIV, also took an aggressive approach to Protestantism. By the late 17th century, 1 million Huguenots still lived in France, and many of them were experienced craftsmen, tradesmen, manufacturers, and merchants. Starting in the 1670s, he closed Huguenot schools and churches. Soldiers were sent to forcefully live in Huguenot homes to make life so hard for them as a way to pressure them to convert or emigrate. In 1685, Louis XIV finally revoked the Edict of Nantes. Protestant worship was banned, schools closed, and ministers forced to convert or leave. Some 250,000 Huguenots fled to countries like England, the Dutch Republic, and Brandenburg, Prussia, bringing with them the invaluable skills they had. The last instance of Huguenot rebellion came during the War of the Spanish Succession. In 1702, the War of the Camisards began in the Cevennes Mountains in southern France. The ensuing massacres and violence dragged on until 1710. Even after defeat, Protestantism in France survived underground, though it would never regain the power, following, and influence it once had.